Speaking of the draft, a new one will come soon enough. And Todd McShay has released his first mock draft of the year. Now, if the NFL season ended today, he has the Titans with the top pick, taking Ohio State defensive end Joey Bosa, number 1, followed by the Browns, who would take Paxton Lynch, and the Chargers taking Robert Nkemdiche. So Todd McShay also has 2 quarterbacks cracking the top 10, Paxton Lynch, the Memphis QB, and Jared Goff. And Adam, I'll ask you about Lynch's chances of declaring for the draft this go-round.
Yeah, talking to multiple personnel people, the expectation is in the scouting community that he will declare by the January 18th deadline. The earliest any underclassman could declare would be after their bowl game. The Memphis bowl game is on December 30th against Auburn. So people love him in the National Football League. I spoke to 2 teams this week who told me that they're looking into his background. They want to know what kind of leadership this guy has, because at that position, we talked about Jameis Winston, it's not just the talent. He's 6'7", 240, 245. It's not about the size. What's he got up here? What kind of leader is he? And that's what they want to look at.
You know, the other thing, Wendy, it'll be really interesting here, if that's the right draft order. Long time since we had the first team picking, didn't need a quarterback, and had a really good quarterback in the draft. It led to the Rams trade of the Bradford and the RG3 and all those picks. So if this is actually the order of the picking, this will create a really interesting thing to follow.
Well, it will. I mean, it was something for us to follow, which is always a good thing in those days and weeks leading up to the draft, when we talk about it nonstop. Jared Goff, will he declare?
Jared Goff, that's a good question, because when you talk to people around the league, very up and down season at the University of California. Some really good games. People point to that Utah game when he was horrendous, too many interceptions, but people love the leadership. He's a pretty good athlete, better than average arm strength, but the turnovers, it's always hard for people to evaluate why the guy had turnovers. Kirk Cousins, final year at Michigan State, a lot of turnovers. Matt Ryan, final year at Boston College, a lot of turnovers. Joe, you've been through this evaluating it.
Yeah, the quarterback turnovers is a really scary thing, and it's not anywhere near as complicated a defense that you play in college as the pros. So a lot of quarterbacks have been downed in the draft because they've thrown too many interceptions.
Well, you know, it makes sense. If you're throwing turnovers at the college level,
exactly.
again,
it's
you
easier.
Where it's a lot easier. That's a huge step to the next level. I do want to ask you this. We talked about Robert Nkemdiche, and there was an incident recently where he had an issue with synthetic marijuana. Now, look, these things happen, but it is fair to at least ask how much of a difference this makes, if any. Joe?
Well, the answer is you don't know until you do a lot of research, and every team is going to have a different definition of what they're willing to put up with. I was very, very conservative about this. It didn't take a lot for me to move a guy down or even take a guy off the draft board. But we've seen there are teams that are willing to take a lot of risk with this, but you got to do a lot of research, and I promise you, with a guy this high on the board, every single team that could possibly pick him has a lot of people working on it.
Well, it's an investment. You know, let's face it, this is an investment.
That's the key. They have to find out what the real story is, because sometimes you see a report in the media doesn't quite measure up to really what happened. That, to me, is the difference between it being a top 10 pick and either dropping off the board or dropping more rounds.
The other thing, Adam, is it the tip of the iceberg?
Or
is it just an isolated incident?
Sure.
Which is a whole different ball game,
Very good point.
so to speak.